first thing you learn behind a bar is that people show you exactly who they are after the third drink. I've been bartending for 6 years. I've seen grieving widows nurse the same glass of plum wine for 2 hours. I've seen CEOs cry over their exes. I've seen men who spend their days being very important become, at 1 a.m., remarkably small. I thought I'd seen everything. Then Ryu Jihan walked in. It was a Thursday. October. The kind of cold that hasn't committed yet, still pretending it might warm up. We had maybe 12 customers. Regulars mostly. The after-shift crowd from the hospital 2 blocks over. A couple of sharing jjajangmyeon takeout at the corner table like this was their living room, which in a way it was. I noticed him because he didn't fit. Everything about him was expensive in that quiet, deliberate way. The kind of man whose watch costs more than my annual rent but wears it like it's nothing. He sat at the far end of the bar, didn't look at the menu, just looked at me. Whiskey, neat, the good kind. I poured it without comment. He drank it fast. Then another. I should have slowed him down after the second one. I noticed his hands, slightly unsteady, the kind of tremor that isn't visible until you've been watching people's hands as long as I have. I set a glass of water beside the third pour without being asked. He looked at it, then at me. I didn't order that. It comes with the third one, I said. House policy. He didn't argue. He drank the water too, which told me he wasn't completely gone yet. But by the fourth drink, something had shifted. His posture loosened. His eyes lost their precision. He started talking. Not to me specifically, just into the air, the way drunk people do when the dam finally breaks. You know what the problem with people is, he announced. They always want something. I kept wiping down the counter. Everyone in that room today, sitting there with their folders and their projections. Every single one of them. He gestured vaguely. You people at least have the excuse of needing tips. I stopped wiping. You people, I repeated. He either didn't hear the shift in my voice or didn't care. Just make what you think is good. Omegas are supposed to be good at reading moods, right? So read mine. The bar went quiet. Not dramatically, just that. Specific silence where the ambient noise continues but everyone at the counter subtly stops moving. Unsol, my coworker, went very still beside the glass rack. I set down my cloth. Slowly, I looked at Ryu Jihan the way I'd been taught to look at problems. Not with heat, but with clarity. Already decided, I'm going to need you to leave. He laughed. He actually laughed, the sound bouncing off the low ceiling, like he'd said something charming. Do you know who I don't care, I said. Up, please. I came around the bar. I didn't touch him roughly. Just 2 fingers on his shoulder, the same way you'd redirect anyone who'd overstayed their welcome, firm, final. I walked him to the door and deposited him on the pavement outside with the same energy. I'd give a bag of recycling. His driver materialized from a black car across the street almost immediately, which told me people in his life were very practiced at managing his exits. I went back inside. I finished my shift. I went home at 3 a.m. on the bus. Standing, holding the overhead rail, I thought that was the end of it. 3 weeks later, I arrived at the bar to find Jung Si, our building landlord, waiting outside with the expression of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. The building had been sold. The new owner was not renewing small tenant leases. The new owner was RJH Group. I read the acquisition notice twice in the back room, while Yunsol hovered in the doorway, making the face he makes when he wants to say something but knows better. The logo on the letterhead was clean, minimal, expensive. I'd seen it before, on a watch, on a Thursday night. I sat with it for exactly 4 minutes. Then I started making calls. A lawyer first. My grandmother's old customer. Retired now, but sharp. Then the other tenants. The dry cleaner upstairs. The elderly couple running the bookshop. The alterations place on the corner. Then a journalist I'd poured enough late-night drinks for to have her personal number. The story ran small, but it ran, tucked into a corner of a culture blog with just enough reach to be inconvenient for a man with a public image to manage. It didn't stop anything, but it bought time. He came personally. I hadn't expected that. Jihan walked into bar last, call it noon on a Tuesday, in a gray coat, and the same unreadable face from that Thursday night, except now he was completely sober, and so was I, and the absence of the Bar's atmosphere made the confrontation feel surgical, clean, inevitable. He saw me. Something moved across his expression. Not guilt, not quite recognition. Something more complicated that he sealed over almost immediately. I spoke first. "So this is what it looks like," I said, "when a man with too much money has a bad night and decides someone else should pay for it. This acquisition was planned before." "I don't care," I said. The echo of his own words returned to him with exact precision, landed somewhere behind his eyes. I watched it land. I didn't move. He straightened, clasped his hands behind his back. When he spoke again, his voice was completely controlled. "I'd like to discuss a proposal." "Then sit down," I said. "I'll pour you some water." "House policy." Yunsol, somewhere behind me, made a sound he quickly converted into a cough. Jihan sat down, and I thought, not for the last time, that I had absolutely no idea what I was walking into. The proposal was reasonable. That was the most irritating thing about it. Relocate Bar last. Call to a newly renovated unit on the ground floor of the redeveloped building. Same square footage. Lower rent for the first 2 years. Modern ventilation, updated plumbing, proper lighting. On paper it was generous. In the conference room where Jihan laid it out. Clean table, neutral walls. His assistant standing by the door, like a well-dressed statue. It sounded almost like a solution. I turned it down. "This neighborhood isn't a concept," I told him. "You can't lift it out, renovate it, and put it back expecting it to still be the same thing. The bar would remain operational. Your customers, my customers come because this place has been here for 19 years, because my grandmother served their parents, because the ceiling is too low and the stools are uncomfortable, and it smells like whatever someone ordered an hour ago. You can't replicate that. You can only destroy it and offer something prettier in its place." He looked at me for a long moment. "That's sentimental." "Yes," I said, "it is. We're done for today." The weeks that followed had a strange quality to them. Neither resolution nor full war, just a grinding, bureaucratic tension played out in meeting rooms and email chains, punctuated by occasional moments where Jihan and I occupied the same space and the air felt different in a way I didn't examine closely. He was always prepared. I'll give him that. Every counterpoint I raised, he'd already considered. Every angle I pushed, he had documentation for. It should have felt like being outmatched. Instead, it felt like the only conversation I'd had in years that required my full attention. I didn't like what that meant, so I ignored it. Yunsol, predictably, did not ignore it. "You get sharper when he's around," he observed one evening. "Collecting glasses. I'm always sharp. You get a different kind of sharp, like a knife that's been recently sharpened. That's the same thing." "It really isn't." I cut the conversation dead the way I always did, by simply not continuing it. But later, wiping down the counter after closing, I caught myself replaying an exchange from that afternoon's meeting. The way Jihan had paused before, responding to my point about the building's historical registry status. Just half a second, long enough to tell me the angle had actually landed. I put the cloth down and went home. 2 weeks later, Yunsol betrayed me. He would argue it wasn't betrayal. He would call it concern or context, or I was trying to help. Seonjae, you never let anyone help you. What he did was this. He told Jihan about my grandmother, not carelessly, carefully, which was somehow worse. He told him how she'd built this bar from nothing in her 50s after my grandfather died, how she'd worked it every night until her hands gave out, how she left it to me, specifically, because she knew I'd rather burn it down than sell it. How the bar wasn't a business to me. It was the last place on earth where I could still feel her. He told Jihan all of this because he thought it would make Jihan back off. It did the opposite. The next proposal was different. I knew it immediately. I felt it before I'd even finished reading. The specific, personalized weight of information being used as architecture. The new terms included a preservation clause for the bar's original counter and signage, a grandfather provision for existing staff, a community pricing structure to keep regulars from being priced out of the renovated space. Every single adjustment mapped directly onto something Yunsol had told him. I set the document down. I looked up at Jihan across the table. He was watching me with that careful, controlled expression. Waiting, I realized, for gratitude. or relief, or some softening that would signal the wall coming down. You had someone give you information about my life, I said quietly. Something shifted in his expression. That's not, and you used it. I kept my voice level, not because I was calm, because I was furious in the specific way that burns cold. You went looking for where the soft spot was, and someone handed it to you on a plate, and you built a strategy around it. Seonjae, don't. The word came out clean and final. Don't explain it to me. Don't tell me your intentions. I know what this is. You're wrong. Maybe, I said. But I'm done for today. I left. I didn't look back. I walked 4 blocks in the October cold before I realized I'd forgotten my jacket in the conference room. I kept walking anyway. The legal resolution came 3 weeks later. The bar would stay. The lease renewed under revised terms. Fair but not comfortable. The kind of margin that required everything to go right every month. A win. I told myself it was a win. I stood behind my counter on a quiet Tuesday with the lights low and the music too soft, and I made a gin cocktail for a regular, and it was too bitter, and I knew it was too bitter when I set it down. Rough night? She asked. No, I said. Yunsol waited until she moved away. You've been making bad drinks for 2 weeks. They're fine. Seonjae. He turned to face me fully. I told him about your grandmother. That was me. I thought, I know it was you. He went quiet. Then, are you angry at me? Or at him? I picked up another glass, turned it in my hands, set it down without filling it. I don't know yet, I said honestly. That was the most I could give him. That was the most I had. Jihan stopped coming. Not dramatically. He simply wasn't there anymore. No meetings requested, no emails. Just absence where friction used to be. I noticed. I told myself I was monitoring the situation. I wasn't monitoring anything. I just noticed. Taehyun came to the bar on a Wednesday evening and sat down like a man confessing. I recognized him. Jihan's assistant, always stationed by the door in those conference rooms like furniture that occasionally handed over documents. He looked different without the context of his employer, smaller somehow, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. He ordered a light beer and didn't drink it. Mr. Han, he said finally, the information about your grandmother, I gave it to Unsol to give to Mr. Ryu, without authorization, without telling either of them the full chain. He paused. Mr. Ryu did not go looking for your soft spots. He received them from me, because I thought knowing would make him more careful with you. I stood very still. He didn't know where it came from, Moon continued. When you accused him of weaponizing it, he couldn't explain without implicating me, so he didn't. The bar hummed quietly around us. Someone laughed at the corner table. Ice shifted in a glass somewhere behind me. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because he looks terrible, Moon said simply, and I'm tired of watching it. He left the beer untouched and walked out. I stood there for a long moment, holding a cloth I'd forgotten I was holding, feeling the specific discomfort of a certainty coming apart at the seams. I didn't go to him immediately. I'm not built that way. I sat with the information for 4 days. I turned it over the way you'd turn over something sharp. Carefully, looking for the angle that draws blood. I checked it against my memory of every exchange in every conference room, every proposal, every moment I'd read as calculated manipulation. The math changed. Slowly and against my will, the math changed. He hadn't researched my weakness. He'd received it, used it clumsily, and then absorbed my accusation in silence to protect someone else's mistake. That was either nobility or stupidity, possibly both. On the 5th day, I unlocked the bar at closing time instead of locking it. He came at 11:47 p.m. I don't know how he knew I'd be there, or if he'd simply decided to try. He stood at the glass door, coat collar up against the November cold, and looked at me through the window with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. No strategy, no composure armor, just a man standing outside a door. He wasn't sure he'd be allowed through. I held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then I reached over and unlocked it. He sat at the counter. I didn't ask what he wanted. I made 2 drinks, something warm, something simple, and set one in front of him. He looked at it, then at me. Moon told you, he said. Yes. I should have found a way to explain without... Yes, I said again. You should have. He accepted that without flinching. No defense, no redirect. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a man taking the full weight of something. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the acquisition, for showing up here the way I did that night. For every version of this where I used what I have to run over what matters to other people." I looked at him for a long time. "That's a good apology," I said finally. He almost looked relieved. "Don't," I said. "I'm not finished." I set my glass down. "Even if I believe you about the misunderstanding, and I'm not fully there yet, it doesn't erase what you are. You bought a building in a bad mood. That's not a mistake. That's a reflex. And your reflex is to own things." The bar was very quiet. "I know," he said. "That's the kind of thing that doesn't just go away because you apologize for one incident. I know that too. So what exactly are you asking me for?" He was quiet for a moment. His hands were around his glass, not drinking, just holding it like something to anchor him. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I haven't earned that." Another pause. "I think I'm asking if there's anything left to work with. Between whatever this has been." I should have said no. It would have been the cleaner answer. "I'm not fragile," I said instead. "I need you to understand that before anything else. Not as a warning, as a condition. I don't need protecting. I don't need managing. And I will tell you directly when you've crossed a line. If that's not something you can actually handle." "It is," he said. "You haven't experienced it yet. You think it is. Then let me find out," he said quietly. "I'm still here." What followed wasn't romantic. Not in any way I recognized from the outside. It was uncomfortable and slow and interrupted, constantly by both of us being exactly who we were. Jihan had 12 years of controlling every room he walked into. It didn't dissolve overnight. There were moments I watched him physically restrain the impulse to fix things I hadn't asked him to fix. Once, in a conversation about the bar's revised budget, he started restructuring my numbers without asking, and I closed the folder and said, "Do that again, and we're done." And the look on his face was that of a man genuinely recalibrating. He recalibrated. That was the part I hadn't predicted. The renovation completed in early December. The night the bar reopened, it was full within an hour. Same terrible stools, same low ceiling, same lighting I'd refused to change, despite 3 separate suggestions. The original counter, scarred and dark with age, running the length of the room exactly as my grandmother had left it. I stood behind it and felt something settle in my chest, like a key turning in a lock. Yunsol appeared beside me, shoulder to shoulder, and said nothing. Sometimes that's the only thing worth saying. Across the room, near the door, Jihan stood with his coat still on, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to stay. I didn't wave him over, but I didn't look away either. After a moment, he took the coat off. "Nobody tells you what comes after the hard part. Everyone understands the fight, the confrontation, the accusations, the door closing on a cold night. Those parts have shapes you can trace. What comes after? The quiet, the slow rebuilding, the learning to stand in the same space as someone without bracing for impact. That part has no clean edges. You just live inside it and try not to ruin it." Jihan started coming to the bar on Thursday nights. Not every Thursday. Enough Thursdays that by the third one, Yunsol stopped raising his eyebrows and started simply setting out a second glass without being asked. Jihan never arrived before 10. He always sat at the far end of the counter. He never asked for anything specific. Just whatever I thought was good, which was either trust or laziness. And I chose not to investigate which. We talked, carefully at first, the way you test ice before putting your full weight on it, then less carefully, then sometimes not at all, which turned out to be its own kind of language. He was different outside boardrooms, not softer exactly, more like a frequency I could finally hear without static. He had a dry, unhurried humor that surfaced only when he'd stopped performing composure. He noticed small things, the way I reorganized the back shelf by instinct when I was thinking hard, the specific glass I reached for when I was tired versus when I wasn't. He noticed and said nothing, which is the correct response. I noticed things about him too. I kept those observations to myself. 3 months into Thursdays, Yisu came in on a Friday. I knew Yisu distantly. He moved in overlapping circles, elegant and self-possessed, the kind of man who had made peace with every compromise. He'd chosen and wore that peace like expensive clothing. He sat at the bar and ordered something complicated, and watched me make it with an expression I couldn't fully read. "You know he restructured 2 executive contracts last month," he said. Without preamble, I kept my eyes on the glass. I don't follow RJH Group news. 3 female Omega employees had been quietly underpaid for years. Designation-based adjustments buried in the original contracts. He found it, corrected it, and removed the 2 board members responsible. Yisu tilted his head. He didn't announce it. No press release. I only know because one of those employees is my cousin. I set the finished drink in front of him. "Why are you telling me?" I asked. "Because," Yisu said carefully, "I spent a long time making strategic decisions about who I was willing to be, and I told myself it was strength." He picked up his glass. "I'm not sure anymore." He left a generous tip and didn't come back that night. I stood behind the counter for a long moment after, something quiet and unnameable moving through me. The following Thursday, Jihan came in at his usual time, sat at his usual seat. I made his drink without asking, something I'd been quietly perfecting for weeks, adjusting it each time by small degrees. The way you tune an instrument you're learning. I set it in front of him. He took one sip and went still. He looked up at me. "This is different." "Is it?" I said, not a question. He looked at me for a moment with that expression I'd stopped, being able to fully armor against the one where all the precision dropped away, and he was just a person trying to understand another person. "What changed?" "Nothing," I said. "I just got it right." He accepted that. He always knew when to accept things without pulling on them. The night everything shifted happened without announcement, the way the important things usually do. It was late February. The bar had emptied early. A cold weeknight, and Yunsol had left at midnight. With a knowing look I pretended not to see. It was just Jihan at the counter, and me behind it, and the low sound of something instrumental I'd put on without thinking. He'd been quiet for an hour. Not uncomfortable quiet, the other kind. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask." "Do you ever regret it? Keeping the bar? The cost of it?" I thought about it honestly, the way the question deserved. "No," I said. "But I understand now that keeping something doesn't mean nothing changes. It just means the changes happen on your terms." He was quiet again. Then, "I've been thinking about my father's company the same way, whether I'm running it or just preserving it." It was the most personal thing he'd ever said to me, unprompted. I understood the weight of it, what it cost him to say it out loud to another person instead of sealing it somewhere internal and airless. "What did you decide?" I asked. "Still working on it," he said. I nodded slowly. "That's a good answer." The customer who changed everything came in on a Thursday in March. Young, new face, visiting the neighborhood. She sat 2 seats from Jihan, ordered a cocktail, and glanced between us with the open curiosity of someone who hadn't learned yet to be subtle about it. "Are you 2 together?" she asked. The bar held its breath. Or maybe that was just me. I looked at Jihan. He looked at me. In his expression was everything the last 5 months had been. The arguments, and the silences, and the Thursday nights, and the drink I'd finally gotten right, and the things neither of us had said out loud yet because we were both, in our own ways, very careful people who had been careless before and knew exactly what it had cost. "We're working on it," I said. I turned back to my shaker. Behind me I heard Jihan pick up his glass, and then, quietly, unhurriedly, in the way of a man who had finally stopped performing, he laughed. Not the sharp, defensive laugh from that first Thursday in October. Something real, something that belonged only to this room, this counter, this hour. I didn't turn around, but I felt myself smile, small and private, facing away. Bar last call. Open until 2 a.m. My grandmother built this place so people would have somewhere to land. I think, finally, I understand what she meant.